Elon Musk is laser focused on the Social Security Administration, the organization that provides benefits to nearly 70 million Americans. Washington Post reports this about the havoc wreaked by Elon Musk and his team. Quote, they came in aggressively. A former official who witnessed Elon Musk's team take over the Social Security Administration said, demanding access to sensitive taxpayer data and refusing briefings on how the agency ensures the accuracy of its benefit systems. They recklessly exposed data in unsecured areas outside Social Security offices, the official said, potentially disclosing personally identifiable information on almost every American to people not authorized to see it.
Markets plummeted Monday as investors expressed fear of an economic slowdown. All three major indexes were in the red. The Dow lost nearly 900 points, falling roughly 2%. The Nasdaq experienced its worst day since 2022, falling 4.7%. And the S&P was down 2.7%, its worst day of the year. In an interview that aired Sunday, President Trump was asked point blank if he's expecting a recession this year, and he did not rule it out.
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing. And there are always periods of, it takes a little time. It takes a little time.
Also fueling uncertainty in the markets is the response to the president's tariffs. China on Monday imposed retaliatory tariffs on a wide range of American farm products. The move puts a 10% levy on U.S.-made pork, beef, soybeans, dairy products, seafood, fruits, and vegetables. There's also a 15% tariff on imports of American chicken, wheat, corn, and cotton. Kelly, we'll start with you. What's happening on Wall Street?
Uncertainty. Okay. Investors are looking at what is happening with our trade policy, when tariffs are going into effect, what countries, what products, and the fact that it's changing so quickly. And it's really hard to make investment decisions because while the market is not the economy by any means, okay, it is an indication of how investors think businesses and consumers will react. And if you have a consumer looking at what's happening here, what's happening with inflation, you might see some of them pull back in spending. And so, yes, market is not economy, but how a consumer acts is.
Tariffs are a tax hike on foreign countries that, again, have been ripping us off. Tariffs are a tax cut for the American people. And the president is a staunch advocate of tax cuts. As you know, he campaigned on no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, no taxes on Social Security benefits. He is committed to all three of those things, and he expects Congress to pass them later this year.
I'm sorry, have you ever paid a tariff? Because I have. They don't get charged on foreign companies. They get charged on the importers.
And ultimately, when we have fair and balanced trade, which the American people have not seen in decades, as I said at the beginning, revenues will stay here, wages will go up, and our country will be made wealthy again. And I think it's insulting that you're trying to test my knowledge of economics and the decisions that this president has made. I'm now regret giving a question to the Associated Press.
I mean, she's awash in regret and remorse and offense, but she's either tragically uninformed or lying. There is no economist that's been tapped to sit in Donald Trump's cabinet who would testify under oath to what she just said. Quote, tariffs are a tax cut for the American people. Simply the opposite is reality. Why do you think they're on such a furious propaganda mission around the tariffs?
I think that Donald Trump has a very, very unusual, idiosyncratic, and completely incorrect understanding of how tariffs work. You can look at economists everywhere from the Libertarian Cato Institute to the left of center think tanks in Republican and Democratic administrations, aside from the Trump administration, and they all agree that tariffs function as tax increases on consumers. What happens with a tariff is that companies importing pay the cost of the tariff, and they mostly pass those costs on to consumers. You can go look at corporate earnings calls, and they all say that tariffs function this way. So, I think that this comes from Trump himself, who has for decades now held this unusual understanding of tariffs, but it doesn't make it real. It doesn't make it true. And we already have companies saying that they will have no choice but to pass some of the cost increases on. And again, these are not companies that are heavily politically aligned. Some of the companies that have been most concerned about the tariffs are heavy industrial companies concerned about the cost of steel, aluminum, and other manufacturing inputs. So as much as Trump believes this, it's simply not true. And American consumers are finding that out right now.
Taking a live look right now at the Capitol building, where we may just be a couple of days away from a partial government shutdown. Government funding is set to run out as soon as Friday. As Doug Lozada reports from Washington, the finger pointing has already begun.
Democrats say that with Republican control here in Washington, the GOP is responsible for averting this crisis, while the president says Democrats are to blame.
Could happen. I mean, the Democrats want that. They want to destroy the country.
The president, on his way back from Florida yesterday, blamed Democrats who are vowing to oppose the GOP's new stopgap spending bill that came out over the weekend. Many want to assert Congress's authority when it comes to the power of the purse.
I don't want to give it up, and I'm going to fight like hell not to give it up to Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
The GOP plan, called a continuing resolution, or CR, would extend government funding through September, offering a small boost to defense spending and a small cut in other programs.
Yeah, I believe we won't shut the government down come Friday.
Republicans remain hopeful, but margins are tight on Capitol Hill, and they'll need at least some buy-in from Democrats in the Senate to make this happen.
The House of Representatives has just approved a stopgap spending bill that would keep the federal government open. NBC News chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles joins us now. Tell us what you're seeing and what's happening up there and why this matters.
Well, Nicole, it is very important that this passed in the form and fashion that it passed, because it's now going to put Democrats in the United States Senate in a difficult position as to how they're going to handle the next stage of this negotiation. The bill ended up passing in the House by a very slim margin of 217 to 213, largely along partisan lines. There was one Republican, Tom Massey of Kentucky, who voted no, but there was also one Democrat, Jared Golden of Maine, who voted yes. Now it is going to be up to the Senate to decide with finality whether or not this stopgap spending bill is signed into law and is passed.
Developing story on the campus of Columbia University. A student connected to pro-Palestinian protests last year has been detained by ICE. This comes on the heels of President Trump announcing the university will be stripped of federal funds. Eyewitness News reporter Sonia Rincon has the latest from Morningside Heights. Sonia.
Yeah, Tanya, an attorney for Mahmoud Khalil says even though he holds a green card, ICE agents came and detained him last night, claiming that his student visa was being revoked. Well, his attorney says he doesn't have a student visa. He is married to a U.S. citizen who also happens to be 8 months pregnant, and now she doesn't know where he's being held, and ICE won't tell her. Mahmoud Khalil spoke with ABC News during protests here at Columbia University last year, and you're looking at video from those protests. Khalil, who is Palestinian, was a student negotiator when there were tents on campus. Now, he graduated in December but still lives in the neighborhood. He was arrested at his home, according to his attorney, who says agents claim to be following a State Department order. That attorney, Amy Greer, says ICE's arrest and detention of Mahmoud follows the U.S. government's open repression of student activism and political speech, specifically targeting students at Columbia University for criticism of Israel's assault on Gaza. Now, State Assembly member Emily Gallagher added in a social media post, "You can't detain someone and revoke their legal status because you don't like their speech. That's not my opinion. It's central to the rule of law." And the New York Immigration Coalition says if someone with a green card is suspected of committing a crime, well, they'd have to be arrested for that first. President Donald Trump has said he wants to have foreign students deported and detained if they're seen as agitators in campus protests, and advocates say this is a very dangerous policy. The administration also announced Friday that it is cutting $400 million in grants and contracts for Columbia University because of what it says was its failure to thwart anti-Semitism on campus.
The Secretary of State reserves the authority to revoke the green card or the visa of an individual who serves as an actually, it says right here, reasonable grounds to believe that the alien's presence or activities in the United States would have potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences to the United States. And I think siding with Hamas makes that quite clear. Secretary Rubio exercised that authority, and we fully believe that we are going to move forward with more arrests, as President Trump previewed in his statement yesterday. Ed.
Yeah, thanks.
Go ahead.
So are there conversations between the administration and the Canadians going on over this tariff? Because the Ontario Premier says the next step is to cut off electricity to the U.S.
And the president put out a statement after seeing those comments and said that it would be there would be grave consequences imposed on Canada if they think about shutting off electricity for the United States of America and our citizens. And the president is also determined to ensure that we are depending on American electricity, not the electricity production of foreign nations, including our allies in Canada. As for conversations, there is continued correspondence between the president's team, particularly Secretary Lutnick, and the Canadians as well.
If we can't come to terms with where we are, then we are a most unenviable people. And what do I mean by that? It means that there are glaring issues that tell us where we are, but we just don't want to believe it. Veterans Affairs, the VA, to lay off 80,000 workers. This is where we are. And what we can come to terms with is this. We must either learn to quickly trust God, throw ourselves at his feet, stay totally committed to him, or we, through panic and fear and disbelief, are going to abandon him. When we move from emotion and not from biblical principle, it's inevitable that we're going to have these kinds of challenges. But let's get started, and let's read Aubrey Duncan's latest article. In 2014, Smithsonian Magazine named Ellen G. White as one of the 100 most significant Americans of all time. She was also named as one of the 10 most famous religious commentators in America. White was featured in the religious figures category and received more space in the magazine than any other religious figure. Here's one of her prophetic gems. We're living in the time of the end. The fast fulfilling signs of times declare that the coming of Christ is near at hand. The days in which we live are solemn and important. Okay, now tell me this. Let's just stop right there. What about what she's saying is a party? What about what she's saying is exciting and thrilling and captivating and makes the children just jump up and down with joy? Do you hear any of that? I don't. The Spirit of God is gradually but surely being withdrawn from the earth. Okay, so let me ask you this. If the Spirit of God is being withdrawn from the earth, heavenly graces such as empathy and sympathy and compassion, which is not within the character of mankind. It's not. How in the world do we think that the world is going to go on if the Spirit of God is being withdrawn from the earth? How do we think that? Plagues and judgments are already falling upon the despisers of the grace of God. The calamities by land and sea, the unsettled state of society, the alarms of war are portentous. They forecast approaching events of the greatest magnitude. The agencies of evil. Wait a minute. We live in a great place, great nation. There are agencies of evil. What? He said plural? Agencies? Not agency. Agencies. Plural of evil. No. These folks are nice. No. That's not what she says. And I believe the prophet. She said the agencies of evil are combining their forces and consolidating. They are strengthening for the last great crisis. Great changes are soon to take place in our world, and the final movements will be rapid ones. And you see them snatching people's jobs and discharging them left and right, and we see people who are losing benefits and they're losing revenue and income, and they're running up property taxes so significantly. For the states that receive half of their revenue from the federal government that is now just cut revenue to states. Where are they going to get their money from? You. They're going to get it from you. How are they going to get it? In the form of property taxes. What are they going to do with property taxes? For all you good folks who live in the city, it's going to double, it's going to triple, it's going to quadruple. And when the Lord told us to get out of the cities, it was more than just the violence. It was more than just the control. It was to survive. And we didn't want to believe. And guess what? This is without war. This is without a pandemic. This is without anything like we've seen with COVID or any of that. This is just a restructuring of the government. Okay. Now do you see the consequences of being slothful in executing God's will? If the final movements are rapid ones, it's going to run you over. It's going to outpace you. It's going to move faster than you can think. It's going to make you anxious if you're not anchored in the Lord. Period. So Aubrey Duncan brings to the forefront this quotation from Testimonies, Volume 9, page 11, and listen to what he writes. The lightning speed with which the American experiment is being demolished is astonishing as it is grossly misunderstood. Now listen to this very, very indicting statement he makes. The fearful and spineless response of those who have the power and given the mandate to disentangle the demolition ball is pathetic and unprecedented in American history. When senators and congressmen, the ones who ought to be the bulwarks against executive excesses, relinquish their position to oppose the tyrannical program of a declared want-to-be dictator, then we may know, according to John the Revelator, that the lamb-like beast is swiftly becoming a dragon. Powerful. That's one paragraph. Powerful paragraph. That's where we are, folks. Completely, adequately, appropriately summarized where we are. Senators and congressmen are like muzzled, not saying a word. And he calls them fearful and spineless. Now, folks, let me expand that orbit. So are your pastors. This is not an elevation of one against another. This is a declaration of condemnation. This is a reality check that if your pastor, wherever you go to church, is not warning you, equipping you, declaring to you, they are spineless. If they don't know what time we're living in, it's because they don't want to know. Listen to what Brother Aubrey Duncan states. The prophecy of John the Revelator foretold of the time when America will arise on the world stage as a democratic republic which affords for freedom of worship, allowing each person to worship God, whatever God they may choose, according to the dictates of their own consciences. But John also accurately prophesied a period when the church would be united with the state to enforce worship in accordance with church-state dictates. Such is the time in which we live. America is rapidly exiting a sanctuary professing political openness, economic opportunity, and religious liberty. In its almost 250-year history, the nation has strived to achieve those ideals in its quest for a more perfect union. But, as Bible prophecy so precisely foretold, it is swiftly migrating to a bastion of cultural divisiveness, political suppression, and religious intolerance. That tectonic shift, that means just like an earthquake, you know, you have tectonic plates and they shift, and that's what creates the earthquake. That tectonic shift will inevitably lead to persecution and tyranny beyond anyone's imagination. The devolution, that means we are devolving, not evolving, but devolving, is propelled by a cabal motivated by fear, greed, and racism. Rather than striving for a more perfect union, the land of the free and the home of the brave is being configured into a system designed for the enrichment of the elite at the expense of the oppression of the poor and underprivileged and deprivation of civil and religious rights. He continues, the reliable prophetic voice the Smithsonian cited warned us, quote, when the leading churches of the United States, uniting upon such points of doctrine as are held by them in common, shall influence the state to enforce their decrees and to sustain their institutions, then Protestant America will have formed an image of the Roman hierarchy, and the infliction of civil penalties upon dissenters will inevitably result. James Madison, the third president of the new republic and signatory to its birth certificate, voiced this opinion, which was fundamental to the formation of a nation that emerged from the conventions of the founding fathers. Quote, in the papal system, government and religion are in a manner consolidated, and that is found to be the worst of governments. In most of the governments of the old world, speaking of Europe, the legal establishment of a particular religion, and without or with very little toleration of others, makes a part of the political and civil organization, and there are few of the most enlightened judges who will maintain that the system has been favorable either to religion or to government. Sadly, perhaps in willing ignorance of its visible perpetrators, there is exactly where the nation are headed. Aubrey continues to write, listen to this. Empowered by the ruling of the Papal Supreme Court, which declared Donald Trump to be a monarch. I hope you all didn't miss that. They didn't say he was a president. They said he was a monarch. What is a monarch? A king. And if you watched him carefully, he has been wearing a purple tie frequently. No longer the blue or the red, but frequently in his public address, he wears a purple tie, symbolizing monarchy. And the reason we haven't been keeping pace with what's happening is we don't read. We talk to each other. Well, if I don't know anything and you don't know anything, what is talking to each other going to do? Listen to what he states. Empowered by the ruling of the Papal Supreme Court, which declared Donald Trump to be monarch, he and his minions are moving with breathtaking speed at implementing Rome's plan for America. What is Rome's plan for America? Keep listening. The current president, unlike the first presidents, may not know of Rome, long-standing objective for the destruction of the American Constitution and the way of life it prescribes, but his personal yearning for authoritarian power and disregard for the principles of the Constitution renders him the perfect partner in the papacy's program for the demolition of the American experiment. Whether he is a willing idiot, oh, I like this dude. He writes with a directness that resonates with my heart. And we all don't see. We don't like that kind of language. We say, "Oh, don't be so hard." Oh, no, be direct. Tell it, preach it. Whether he is a willing idiot or informed participant in Rome's Project 2025, the result remains the same: returning the Roman papacy to its lost supremacy, not only in America but around the world. Yes, indeed. Such will be the ultimate result of Make America Great Again. The Trump papal venture portends calamitous political, social, and economic events of an apocalyptic nature. When viewed in a historical and primarily a biblical context, Trump's actions and the papacy's ambitions can never be good for America. The nation's ideals of civil and religious liberty has never been more challenged than it is today. And you're asking what to do? Have you ever seen a fire truck leave the fire station? It always leaves with speed, determination, horns blaring, sirens rolling, lights flashing, men in full dress to go and fight a fire, the magnitude of which has yet to be discovered. But they know that they are being called to action. What in the world are we doing sitting in churches that all they want to do is have another weekend getaway? When will we hear the sirens blaring, the lights flashing? Where is the call to prayer? Where is the fasting and agonizing with the Lord that we might be right with him? Where are our brains? And we think that we're headed for good times, and we think this is just a 4-year hiccup. One has to triumph and the other submit. So Rome is going to triumph and America is going to submit. Prophecy foretells that Rome would emerge as the victor in this toxic relationship of convenience. Listen to what he writes. As the scroll is unfolding before our eyes, one has to wonder, what would a committee comprising of Washington, Jefferson, Franklin, Madison, and Adams, Lincoln, and Hancock have concluded in times like these? Judging from their collective wisdom and keen knowledge of who our greatest enemy was then and still is today, one can safely conclude that they would have started another revolution. It's lethal. The revolution would be against this administration. But I got news for you. It's too late. It's way too late. The Lord is allowing it to happen. Why is he allowing it to happen? Because he wants us to realize we are living at the end of time. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for gifting us the truth about these times. Help us, Lord, to know that what you are sharing with us, what you are providing for us, is not meant to intimidate us, frighten us, or scare us, but literally shake us to reality and help us to come to terms with where we are. Help us to step out of our lethargic condition and do what you've asked us to do. Live in accordance with your word. We're living at the end. Help us to act like it. Help us to pray like it. Help us to prepare like it. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.